Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're at in the world. Maybe it's the middle of the night for you. My name is Lori Torgerson White, and I am a birth coach, a doula, a mother of three, a wife, a scientist, a runner. I'm an animal lover, and I'm author of this book, Awaken Through Birth. And I'm here to talk to you today about the fears that you might be feeling now that you know that you are expecting a baby to join you at some point in the near future. So I know that for me, I actually experienced different feelings with each time that I learned that I was pregnant, and they're all normal. They're all okay. They're all part of going on this journey. And so, while some people might be feeling excitement and anticipation, others might be feeling kind of confused, and others may be feeling scared, right? And so all of those emotions are normal. They're all part of this process. And so whatever you're feeling right now, just know that that's okay. This is a huge change in your life, and fear is a normal part of change for us as humans. But that doesn't mean that fear needs to take over your pregnancy or your birth, or to impact your pregnancy or your birth. Another reason fear is a completely normal response to learning that you're about to bring a baby into this world is because that's what we've been conditioned to think about when we're thinking about birth and pregnancy. Many of our minds are going to go straight to, movie scenes that we have seen where the woman is beet red and sweaty and screaming and clearly having a horrible time. Or to the stories that we've heard our friends tell us of, how their pregnancy, their birth ended up in, an unexpected C-section that they didn't want and that it was scary. And so we have all of these different ways of knowing about birth that have impacted how we feel about birth. And in our society, birth, for the most part, is no longer an event that we see when we're growing up or when we're, young women. We give birth in hospitals in most cases. I think 98% is the stat I've found of births in this country, in the United States, are in hospitals away from the eyes of the community. And so birth is not considered a normal part of life. Ironically, given it is the most important part of life, because without birth you can't have life. But we don't see it. It's not part of life. And so when something is unknown to us, when we don't know very much about it, we often are fearful. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today, is how we can overcome those fears. And the reason, aside from being fearful doesn't feel good, the reason that we want to overcome these fears is because fear can actually slow down labor. It can stall your labor. Women who are fearful, so research actually shows us that women who are fearful during their births end up with longer births, so the duration of labor is longer, and they actually experience more pain than women who are not fearful. So because there's, and you can read about this in my book, or I'm going to make more videos as well, but the connection between our mind and our body is so strong, way stronger, I think, than we're taught growing up in this society. And so when we feel fear, we also feel pain. That's it. So if you are hoping for an unmedicated birth and you're hoping to not hate it, or what I want for you is to be empowered by it, to go, wow, that is amazing, then we want to deal with our fears. Okay. So in order to deal with our fears, we need to learn more, right? Because that's what I said. When it's unknown, we have fear. The problem with learning more about birth in a way that's going to dispel those fears is that it's hard for us to know where to get that information from. So do we get it from TV? Do we get it from movies? Do we get it from the hospital where we're going to birth at, or the doctor, maybe the OB that we've seen, the OBGYN that we've seen since we, had our first pap smear. Is that where we go for information? Do we go to midwives? Do we go to the internet where there's so much information and it is so hard to find credible information? So I would love to help you to go through that information. That's what the purpose of my book was exactly that, to distill this information, because like I said, I'm a scientist. In addition to being a doula, I am also a researcher and a scientist, and so I'm able to take all of the information out there, all of the scientific evidence out there, and distill it down to what you really need if you are looking to experience a transformational, empowering birth. And why would you not want that, right? So in my book, in my book, I talked about 11 of the most common fears that women have, that birthing people have. Sorry, that's my daughter coughing in the background. I am a mother, as I mentioned, and she's home today from school with a cough. So I have 11 fears in my book. I'm going to go through 2 of them here today. Talk about what those fears look like, try to give you the information that can allow you to dispel those fears, and then we'll talk about some other ways to dispel any other fears that you might have. So the first fear, which is a fear that I think is pretty normal, is wondering, okay, so now you're pregnant, you're growing this baby inside of your uterus, right? And maybe you're learning as you go through your pregnancy, your baby starts out tiny, like the size of an apple seed, and now they're a nectarine, and then they're an apple, and then they're pineapple, eventually a watermelon. So you're watching as your baby's getting bigger and bigger, and for some reason someone decided we should tell you how big your baby is based on the size of different fruits. But as that baby gets closer to being a watermelon, you might be wondering, how am I possibly going to be able to fit this baby through my vagina to come out into the world? All right. Totally normal fear to have. Most of us have never had a human exit through our vaginas before, or a watermelon exit through our vaginas. So of course that's something that you're going to be afraid of. And then to compound that fear, so many of us have had stories of that friend who had too big of a baby, right? The doctors told them while they were pregnant that their baby was too big. And as a result of that, they ended up with an emergency C-section, okay? And so I just want to give you some statistics here, or one statistic in this case, to dispel that fear. So there is something called cephalopelvic disproportion. And what that means is that in very rare cases, you have situations where the mother's vagina, the mother's birth canal really, so her pelvis, the bones actually, are too small for the baby's head to fit through. This is usually due to malnutrition. It is extremely rare, so it only occurs in 0.4% of births. So what that means is that 99.6% of women grow babies inside of their bodies that were meant to come through their birth canal, through their vagina, and out of their body. Your body was meant to birth the baby that you created 99.6% of the time. That's going to be you, okay? So I want to talk a little bit more again, though, about the power of our mind. So some doctors, through a woman's pregnancy, if you're with an OB, this happens much less if you are with a midwife. But if you are with an OB, they sometimes will do ultrasounds throughout your pregnancy. Ultrasounds in very early pregnancy are incredibly accurate, okay? But ultrasounds in late pregnancy are not. They're often no more accurate than actually having a person who is trained in feeling your belly on the outside, feeling your baby from the outside. The ultrasound is no more accurate in determining your baby's size than a midwife being able to feel from the outside. And in some cases, the midwife is actually better at assessing how big your baby is. So as you go through your pregnancy, if you have, especially once you get into that third trimester, if you have your doctor, because of an ultrasound, telling you that your baby is too big, then you're going to start to, guess what? Be afraid, right? Because none of us want to have a baby that's too big. We don't want to push a baby that's too big out of our vaginas. I was terrified of this. My wonderful, wonderful husband has a very large head. And so this is something that I was afraid of, that I would end up with a baby who was really big. And of course, you are expecting that that could be incredibly painful. Okay, so this is something that I was afraid of. Luckily, my first baby was tiny, 6 pounds, 6 ounces, 7 ounces. But going back to the power of the mind-body connection. So if your doctor is telling you that your baby is too big along the way, then oftentimes that's creating fear. We know that fear creates hormones that actually work counter to cervical dilation and effacement and lengthen your labor and make it more painful. All of those things are going to lead you to, or could lead you to a reality where you do end up feeling like you can't push that baby out, and you end up with a cesarean that you did not want. So, going back to the 99.6% of babies fit through their mother's birth canal perfectly. Your body was meant to do this. If you are someone who is choosing an OBGYN as your provider, and I'm going to do a whole other video on that. I also talk about the different types of providers in my book, and all of, an OB may be the right provider for you, but just know that as you get further along, if they're telling you that your baby's too big, unless you have something, if you have gestational diabetes, that could contribute to a larger baby. But if you don't have any other conditions that might be contributing to a larger baby, I would just question that practice of saying that your baby's going to be too big, or wanting to induce for a baby who they claim is too big based on an ultrasound. Okay, so it's fear number one, one finger only. Fear number two that we're going to go through today is, what if I don't make it to the hospital on time, right? We've seen in movies when people end up having babies in cars. Nobody wants to have a baby in a car, right? That seems like a horrible, horrible idea. So this one is a little bit easier to dispel, but the reality is that only 2% of births are what are called precipitous labors. So a precipitous labor is a labor that is 3 hours or less from start to finish, okay? 2% of births. So that means 98% of you will not have a precipitous birth, especially for your first baby. It's less common for your first baby. So you can let that go. It's very unlikely to happen. If it does happen, I can tell you, I myself had a precipitous birth for my first birth. So I was sitting on the couch at night watching a movie. It was actually one of the Twilight movies, the one where she's pregnant with a vampire baby, and it was just as they were cutting into her stomach to pull the vampire baby out of her because it was sucking her nourishment, and she was dying, I think, because of it. Just as they cut into her stomach, my water broke, okay? And so I went from watching a movie about a cesarean of a vampire baby to the contractions, or waves, if that's what you want to call them, started within about 15 minutes at about 1 to 2 minutes apart. So we went from relaxing to all of a sudden running around the house, trying to pack things up so that we could make it to the birth center at the hospital that we were birthing at on time. On time, meaning before the baby was born. So we ran around. We did make it on time, I'm happy to tell you. But when we got there, we went into triage, and the nurse there wanted to check me to see how dilated I was. And I told her, I am going to be having this baby right now. I'm having the baby. And she was like, oh, yeah, sure, you're having the baby. You're a first time mom. You just got here. You're probably not having the baby. And I was like, no, I'm really having the baby. And so when she went to look and see how dilated I was, she said, oh, yeah, that's the head. I'm like, yes, I know. I told you, having the baby. So it was about a 2-hour labor from start to finish. The good news about that is it was 2 hours. And while I was shocked by what was happening, and I'm not going to lie, even before I got to the hospital, I was like, I'm having a C-section. I don't know what I was thinking, wanting to have an unmedicated birth. This is crazy. But because I didn't really know, I thought that was going to be how labor was for the next, 20 hours. Had I known that in just 2 hours I would have a baby, I probably would have coped better. But my first baby, but I made it, okay? So even if you are one of the 2%, that birth was amazing and magical, and I felt so powerful. And because it only lasted 2 hours, I was not physically exhausted by it. I didn't need to have any kind of pain medication during or after the birth. And, I think we went home the next day and just went back to our lives, but then with a baby. So all that is to say that what happens is meant to happen. You are strong enough for whatever does happen. You've got this. You're amazing, and you can do it. And there's just no need to worry about it. Okay? All right. So in addition to, I'm going to talk to you about 3 ways that you can overcome your fears. All right. That first one I'm doing for you right now with these 2 fears, and that is to seek out knowledge. As I said before, when we don't know what we're getting ourselves into, that's when we're afraid. And we want to get rid of those fears. There's never a time where you want to ignore a fear that you have. If you have a fear, let's deal with it, okay? Because not dealing with the fear does not get rid of the fear. Still is going to be there, and it's going to pop up right in the middle of that labor. So you want to deal with all of your fears. So first thing is seek out knowledge, but I want you to be careful to seek out knowledge that is supportive of whatever type of birth you want to have. So if the type of birth you want to have is an unmedicated physiological birth, some people call it a natural birth, if that's what you're looking for, then seek out that knowledge, okay? And there are going to be different places, most of you should take a birthing class. I recommend hypnobirthing, really good for giving you the knowledge that you need about what's going to happen. My book is another place you can get that knowledge. There's lots of places. Evidence-based birth is an amazing place to get knowledge. So there are lots of places you can get knowledge, but just be careful about where you're getting your knowledge. If you start to notice that the source that you're getting knowledge from is making you more afraid, then maybe take a step back from that source and find a different source, okay? Because this can be amazing. This will be amazing. And you'll make it so. The next way, so make sure you seek out knowledge. You should definitely listen to birth stories. So because, like I said earlier in the video, we don't see birth in most cases in our society anymore. And that is a shame, because when you see a woman giving birth and bringing new life into the world, bar none, the most magical moments of my life have been bringing my own children into the world and being there to help other women bring their children into the world. So it's something that once you see it and you recognize what's possible, it just becomes part of you. Like, that's what you then expect. Instead of, we want to push out those images, push out the images of birth that are scary, the ones that we've seen on TV or the horror stories we've heard from our friends. Now is not the time. So if someone comes to you with a horror story about birth, you can just politely say thank you so much, but I'm not going to listen to that right now. Because right now I'm working on my mindset, which is the most important way to prepare for birth in addition to, prenatal care, nourishing your body. But if you want to have an amazing birth, you've got to prepare. And mindset is the way to do that. So you can listen to The Birth Hour is an amazing podcast that has lots of great birth stories. There's another one called Positive Birth Story Podcast. You can watch birth videos on YouTube. I would look for home birth videos. Those are going to be the ones usually that are the most empowering. Just keep bringing in positive information so that it can push out anything that is creating fear for you. And then finally, the third way I'm going to tell you today that you can help to dispel your fears. And if you want more tools, there's plenty more in my book. But the third way is journaling. So, as I mentioned, if you have a fear, please don't just squash it down and ignore it. It's not going to go away on its own. You're going to need to deal with it. And so one way that you can deal with it is through journaling. So I like to journal every single morning. I do sort of stream of consciousness writing. It's called the morning pages. But you can do that. And having journal prompts related to your fears is a good way to get them out. And so the journal prompts that I'm going to leave you with today, the first one is, what is your fear? Is it rational or irrational? And then how can you prepare for your birth so that you don't have that fear with you, so that that fear doesn't impact you when you're in labor? All right, that's the end for today. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, weekend, whatever day it is for you. Have a wonderful day. Please, if you have a chance, if you've enjoyed this, if this is helpful to you, like this video, subscribe to my channel, check out awakenthroughbirth.com. You can find me on Instagram at awakenthroughbirth. And I am so excited to be on this journey with you. Thank you so much for listening. Have a fabulous time doing whatever you're doing now. Goodbye.